Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Over the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry and the columnist Angela Epstein. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Financial Times reports that the US and Japan are planning a refit of their security pact, the biggest in 60 years, in a bid to counter China. According to The Sun, Chinese hackers accessed the personal information of around 40 million Britons in a 2021 attack. The Daily Telegraph reports that Whitehall sources believe China, Russia and Iran are fueling disinformation about the Princess of Wales to try to destabilize the nation. The Guardian leads with the two suspects of Friday's terrorist attack in Moscow that left 137 people dead, charged and appearing in court. The Eye reports that an extra £760 million will be spent on nuclear, with spending allocated to modernise Trident. On the front of the Express, the King will release a powerful Easter message this week to provide reassurance to the nation. The Times' lead story focuses on higher education, and it says that Britain's leading universities now get most of their fees from overseas students. The Metro reports that people donated a record nearly $14 billion to charity last year. And the Daily Star says it's joining the search for a shipwreck believed to contain £4 billion worth of gold. See if they find it. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. As I mentioned, we're joined tonight by Anna Soubry and Angela Epstein. Thank you both so much for being with us. OK, let's take a look at the front page of The Telegraph. A sort of interesting take on a story that we've been talking about for weeks. So China and Russia behind slurs on the princess. And of course, this links to the wild speculation that there has been for weeks over the health of Catherine. Anna, what do you make of it?
Well, in a way, this strikes me as a statement of the bleeding obvious. Let me explain that, in the sense that, so if you read what the Telegraph have written, they quote a government spokesman or woman saying part of the modus operandi of hostile states is to destabilise things, whether that is undermining the legitimacy of our elections or other institutions. Well, 'twas ever thus. I mean, that is what hostile states do, is they undermine a country's stability as well as doing other things. And, of course, one of the perfect ways to do that is to put up fake bots and all the other peculiarities that exist on social media and basically put out stuff that's untrue, offensive, conspiracy theories and so on and so forth. And it's as if our media has been slow coming to this. Or maybe it's because with the demise of the old Soviet Union, with our attempts to do trade with China, we thought that these hostile states were actually becoming nice and good people, whereas in fact they're not, and they're just doing their old tricks. But now they can do it on a scale we've never seen before because of social media. And too many of our own citizens, frankly, are too willing to believe a load of this nonsense. But it should not be underestimated. As I say, whether it's elections, and dare I say, I include the EU referendum in that. I think it'll one day all come out. And some of the slurs on the Princess of Wales have been, it would seem, from those sorts of sources.
I mean, what I find remarkable about this story in particular is we were talking, Anna and I, beforehand, because so much coverage is related to the Princess of Wales and obviously her devastating diagnosis that was released on Friday, and the very brave way that she held herself to account and was almost bullied into having to speak about what happened precisely because of this whole culture of disinformation. And I find it remarkable that spreading disinformation about the Princess of Wales, amongst many other things, should be regarded as a source of destabilising. How can inaccuracies about a princess, she's not an elected individual, she has no role in governance, and yet...
It's not an election that you're trying to sway.
Exactly, it's not about accessing records. The records that were accessed, the 40 million or so voters who may have been compromised in the 2021 cyber attack, yes, that's very significant in terms of how we define government. But the Princess of Wales saying one thing or another about her...
It destabilised, because the monarchy is an institution which I mean, I'm very proud of it. You know,
Definitely.
we like the royal family. We are a parliamentary democracy, but we have part of what makes us the country and the governance of our country is having our royal family, the role of the king and so on and so forth. And so you start to put doubt in and to destabilise, that's exactly what they will always do, whichever the institution is, whether it's the courts or whether it's our royal family.
But it's just this idea of this kind of nefarious underbelly that is sort of looking even to the sort of the very personal details of...
I agree.
She's such a benign figure, the Princess of Wales, whether you're a monarchist or not, whether you like the pomp and circumstance of the whole monarchy, she's just very pleasant, and she has some very, very good ideas about mental health and you know, the welfare of children. So for her to be some kind of target, it's such anathema to that whole underworld, don't you think so?
Let's take a look at another story that's kind of linked to it. Front page of The Sun, if we can pull it up. China hack attack on the UK. Chinese hackers access the personal details of 40 million UK voters in an assault on our democracy. Angela, tell us a little bit about what's behind this.
So this is just sort of coming to light now, this complex cyber attack on the Electoral Commission. It was understood to start around 2021, but it didn't actually come to light till October 22. And I think it was only acknowledged last year that there was even an issue. And as part of this attack, what happened was that the attackers were able to access copies of the electoral register, including the names and addresses of countless voters who had registered to vote between 2014 and 22. And then they had access to this huge body of information. And wrapped up with that, there's some suggestion that 43 individuals, including MPs and peers, were also targeted. So that's an enormous kind of dollop of information that has been sort of accessible because of cyber attack. And one wag sort of pointed out that, well, at least paper makes it hard to infiltrate votes, because at least when you go in a ballot box and you do your X, you know, nobody can get in there. But it is deeply concerning.
Yeah, I mean, it does make us feel quite vulnerable, I guess.
We are. And, I mean, there are certain members of Parliament being very brave and courageous in standing up and saying China is a threat. And I think, as I come back to this, for a lot of us, a lot of people would think, well, oh, come on, those days have long gone. They haven't. And it is a reality, and it will continue to be a threat whilst you have these terribly undemocratic, authoritarian countries like China. But with these, they are incredibly powerful economically, and that's why so many people have been concerned about the technology we buy from China and so on and so forth.
But we want it both ways. On the other hand, we want
very
highly high by
Are we unprepared for this kind of threat?
Oh, yes,
manifestly so.
When I was a member of Parliament, we were my email was hacked. I mean, along with many others. Yeah, but many others. I mean, we were all vulnerable to it. But then we are all vulnerable to it.
Every
but it's
day
just
of the
when
week,
it becomes MPs and when it becomes, you know, this sort of information and obviously financial institutions, we rightly get particularly concerned.
Let's take a look at another story which, of course, has been dominating the headlines over the past few days. Front page of The Guardian, and that is linked to that horrific attack in Moscow. Suspects appear in court accused of Moscow attack that left 137 dead. Anna.
Yes, they've got the people responsible for this appalling atrocity. Am I wrong in thinking, but isn't it unusual when these sorts of terrible incidents happen, these terrorist attacks, actually to capture everybody responsible? Because normally
maybe not in Russia.
Sorry?
Maybe not in Russia.
But maybe not in Russia, because...
Well, it's a surveillance state. I mean, you know...
No, but also we're going on their word that, you know... We don't really know.
Exactly, because normally they either kill themselves or they're killed by the forces who are trying to save the people and so on and so forth. There's something about this that makes me feel very uncomfortable in all the horror of it as to the veracity of all of this. I'm afraid I don't trust Putin further than I could throw him, and I think the attempts to smear Ukraine is a very good example of that. But they're in court.
While you mentioned, forgive me, Angela, let's just pull up the front page of the Financial Times, and then I'll ask you, because you mentioned Ukraine. So front page of the Financial Times, Moscow concert attack, Putin directs Russian anger at Ukraine as as suspects interrogated. So, Angela, even though ISIS-K have claimed responsibility, the US says it's them, ISIS-K have even released a video, Putin is still pointing the finger to Ukraine.
Well, this plays to his agenda on many levels. On the one hand, he can use this, he's trying to implicate Ukraine, so he can use this as an excuse to massively mobilise and accelerate the attack on Ukraine. He has some sort of credible reason to do so. Also, I mean, you know, Putin, I don't know him personally, newsflash, but he's a man, obviously, with a monumental ego, as most despots are. And this has been an attack on his vulnerability. You're busy invading another sovereign nation. Meanwhile, on your doorstep, the biggest terror attack in years has happened. So on the one hand, he's trying to weaponise it in order to bolster his reason for attacking Ukraine. And on the other hand, it's called into question just how much he can protect his own citizens. So, you know, on every level, it looks poor. I mean, the ISIS-K are the branch of IS that have relentlessly gone after European targets in Russia and other places. So the maths adds up. But any which way, this is, for a man of his kind of complexion, this is going to very much kind of be a destabilising thing for him.
And we've seen France just in the past 2 hours, I think, raise its terror threat level to the highest level possible. I mean, Anna, it does look like he is going to use this as an excuse.
But you see, it's the word interrogated in that headline. We've referred to the fact that two of them are on the front page of another paper because they're appearing in court. It's the interrogation. What are the chances of the so-called interrogation, which will be torture, that there won't be then a claim from Putin that they've made some sort of admission that Ukraine was bizarrely in some way involved?
You can't imagine due process goes on in a way as it does in other countries.
More examples of what an absolute war criminal and what a horror Putin is. Ruthless, dangerous, murderous. Just beyond the pale. Well, he is, isn't he?
And Angela, thank you so much. We'll be back in a second looking at more of the day's stories, or rather tomorrow's stories. But coming up, the NHS should exploit private healthcare to get back on track, argues the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. And welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry and the columnist Angela Epstein. Thanks so much for staying with us. OK, let's take a look at the front page of the Financial Times. And the story, NHS should exploit private healthcare to get back on track, argues Wes Streeting. Anna.
I'm a big fan of Wes Streeting. We both worked together in Parliament when I was an MP. All round, I think he's somebody certainly to watch for the future. And if Labour win the next election, he's going to be our health secretary. And in this piece on the front page, the FT, he's talking about that we need to exploit, as it's put, the private healthcare to get back on track. In other words, we've got to use the private sector. And there's nothing really that revolutionary about this or new, because that's what's happened for some time under both Conservative and Labour governments. When you need to get people into certain types of, often it'll be things like cataracts, or it'll be hip replacements or knee jobs, and that, then you will use the extra capacity that's in the private sector, and I don't personally have a problem with that. Makes a lot of sense.
Not at all. I mean, we've got a backlog of clinical, diagnostic and procedural issues here, waiting lists, every single element of the health service. And if there is capacity, then it's just very short-sighted not to use it. Of course, it's fraught with kind of social and ethical reasons, but it's not without precedent. Well, there are people who are fundamentally not disposed towards private medicine. They see it as a them and us system. Those that can afford it can leapfrog over others. But it comes back, I hate this whole politics of envy, because there are ordinary people who work very hard who will say, you know what, I don't want to wait 6 months for my varicose veins operation. I'm going to dip into my pot that I was going to use for my dream holiday. I'm going to pay for it. That's a free market economy, and I know that there's an unfair element to that, but I think some people will find it difficult to grasp. But ultimately, we've got these huge waiting lists, so what else do you do?
There's a bit of, which is not to do with this, but there's a bit of an outrageous situation that's going where people are being told they have to wait 18 months, 2 years for, say, a knee joint replacement,
Yes.
and they are living in terrible pain, and then they are scrimping and scraping to go into private health, and that
Yes.
is outrageous in my view. But that's not what this is about. This is about where you've got extra capacity, then let's use that to cut through the waiting lists.
Let's look at another story of something that might happen if Labour get in. Again, front page of the Daily Telegraph. Majority of private schools will raise fees if Labour bring in a VAT rate. Anna.
Well, I mean, this is, again, a statement, really, of the bleeding obvious, isn't it? Because
There's loads this evening.
There's quite a lot of that.
Bleeding
It's
obvious.
weird, isn't it? There's sort of not much news around, but there is actually lots of news, but it's not kind of making the front pages. But anyway, yes, I mean, if Labour... I mean, I struggle with this one. I mean, I'm upfront about this. Both my children were educated privately. I wasn't after the age of 11. And Labour wants to bring in, to charge VAT, and that will have a big impact. And it's not really at the top end that concerns me. It's those people who do make huge efforts to send their children to day school, private day schools. The fees are expensive. They're not ludicrously expensive. Yeah. And a lot of those people who do scrimp and scrape to do that will find that to be a difficulty. And you've got to remember, if loads of people stop using the private sector, then we're going to have our state system has got to be up to scratch, and it's got to take the extra capacity.
And the capacity. And again, it comes back to my original point about the politics of envy. You know, I went to a private school, but I got a scholarship. You know, my parents wouldn't have afforded to send me. And there are a lot of parents who make decisions about the money they have, and education is a priority.
Sure, I mean, politics of envy or, unfair advantages that people get and children get when they get a better education.
But it shouldn't be like that. The better education should be available in the state sector. And instead of all of us put all this anguish into the private sector, only 7% of children go into private
No, but I know, and
let's talk
true.
about the state sector, making those schools ones that you want to send your child to.
But they're not mutually exclusive. The fact is that in a free market economy, there are things that you can spend your money on if you want to that are a higher premium to other products. Well, it's like anything. It's like buying a jacket. You can either buy it from a local chain store or you can go design it. If you earn your money and you have it in your pocket, why shouldn't you spend it on the things that you want? That's a separate argument from raising the standards of our state schools, which goes without question.
We don't have a lot of time, but I really want to look at this story from page of the Metro. £14 billion given in charity to good causes despite cost of living crisis. Did this surprise you? It surprised me.
I love this. I love this story because it restores faith in human nature. We are absolutely over the head. We are, we are completely clubbed the whole time about cost of living crisis, spiralling costs, mortgages in free fall, nobody's got enough money. And still, somehow, the kindness and generosity of human spirit means that people give money to charity.